Good morning. All right, I am in the infrared. No makeup, no filters. Ooh, time to sweat. All right, we got the cold plunge cooling down. Trying to get to 50 degrees Fahrenheit this morning. I don't know if it's gonna make it. I got the 5-gallon jug in there for the first time, so we'll see how that goes. It's been over an hour. It's probably been an hour and a half since I put that in there. I added, I forget how many's in there now, 3, 5. I think there's another 8 in there. So I've got a total of 12 or 13 gallons, something like that, in the cold plunge right now. Frozen, solid ice chunks. So that was the experiment, was to see if I could replicate or transcend the cold plunge pumps, which are really expensive, and the reviews aren't super great. So I'm not trying to talk about any company necessarily, but I also noticed that a lot of people trying to sell things on, let's just say, Amazon, the ratings, if they're not super great, they'll like start the ratings over. So you notice like there's less people that have actually rated the product. I don't know, you guys have probably already figured that out. Anyways, so what I wanted to talk about today
was a couple theories on diabetes. Okay, so diabetes is a huge problem in the world, I believe. I don't know all the numbers, and they change and they're getting worse, but basically a lot of people have diabetes. A lot more people are getting diabetes at faster and faster rates, is every source I've ever heard is what they're saying. Okay, so I think we can all agree it's a pretty big problem, at least in the U.S. Okay, so now, what causes it? That's the big question. How do we treat it? Well, there's different ways to treat it, and officially, you are going to go with the established medical system, which is backed by clinical research and funded by, like, I don't know all their names, but somebody funds
all that research, and that's how things go. So, but what is diabetes? So basically, someone has a lot of sugar. Usually we talk about glucose. I'm not actually sure how fructose and galactose, the other two of the three simple sugars that make all of the different sugar examples that we could name, including starch. But yeah, so sucrose is an example of a disaccharide, so that's fructose and glucose. I don't know if you guys know this, sorry if I'm saying things everybody already knows, but sucrose, the table sugar, the white crystal in the little packets and whatever, that is sucrose, which is a glucose and a fructose stuck together. You have a disaccharide, little white crystals, okay? But you never see that in nature necessarily. Maybe if like fruit juice oozed out and the sun baked all the water out and there was like maybe some crystallization because it dehydrated, but it's still going to be more complicated than just probably single disaccharides, you know, just glucose and fructose stuck to each other. That's like a very extracted form of something that the plant made, you know, by synthesizing through photons and carbon dioxide and water from the roots, and all these things come together through very complicated processes I won't pretend to understand all the details of, but the point being, you know, it was a very complicated substance that was made by whatever plant we're talking about, usually beets. You know, they make beet sugar and coconut sugar, and those are some of the better ones, I would think, you know, versus like sugar cane. Not necessarily that sugar cane's bad. Hold on, let me back up real quick. Sugar cane is beautiful, and I've drank a lot of the juice from sugar cane when I was in Hawaii. And it's so good. And it's not even like, it's not like white table sugar. It's like brown, green, yellow, you know, rusty. It's got some color to it. You know what I mean? It's not like a white crystal like you think of when you think of sugar. So the nomenclature of things, the semantics of arguments, I think obscure the simple principles and the facts that are operating here. So, for instance, we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about sugar, we're talking about specifically and usually glucose of the three simple sugars. So let's just ignore fructose and galactose for a second. and talk about glucose. So glucose is the thing that people measure when they poke their finger, and then you test their blood, and then you see how many glucose molecules are in a certain deciliter, which is 1/10 of a milliliter. I forget, 1/10 of a liter, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Too much detail. That tells you how much sugar's in the blood. The problem with the diabetics, not that sugar's not supposed to be in our blood, because when you eat sugar in whatever form, it will be in your blood for a certain period of time before your body absorbs it into all the cells. And that's a complicated, beautiful process as well. Somehow it involves potassium. I always forget how that's involved, but it does involve potassium. So I like bananas personally. People say I eat too many bananas, but it's also water-soluble vitamins, so don't worry about those so much, because water-soluble vitamins can be excreted through the urine. I think feces, but anyways, the fat-soluble ones are the ones you want to be careful of the overdoses of, which is vitamin D, E, K, and A. So those ones you can get vitamin toxicity if you have too much, so be careful. But potassium, yes, you can be overloaded, especially if you have kidney problems, but basically potassium, vitamin C, those things are water soluble, and your body can pee out the excess. Okay. That being said, most people, when they go to, let's say, a hospital in the US, they're going to be deficient a lot of times in potassium and magnesium and sometimes calcium, or excess, depending on how their kidneys are doing. Anyways, I digress.
Too much sugar in the blood for too long a period of time causes a lot of
problems. And one of the things that happens with that is something called a hemoglobin A1C. I don't know if the A stands for something like an acronym, but hemoglobin A1C is a measurement of how many hemoglobin molecules in your blood have glucose attached to them, which is, as far as I understand, a glycolated, what's that thing you don't want? Glycation end products or something? Glycation end product. There's some problem with the glucoproteins. Anyways, if we have too much of anything, it's a bad thing, right? So we need sugar. Our brain loves sugar. Well, people argue if ketones or glucose are the favorite fuel source of the brain. But if you have sugar in your body, your brain burns sugar. And it stops doing ketones. But I'm not saying ketones are bad, and I love fasting. And actually, I fast every day. Currently, I'm fasted, except for some caffeine, if you couldn't tell. But yeah, it's my day off, so I'm just waking up in the infrared sauna. And I wanted to rap about diabetes. Let's stay on track. So now, hemoglobin A1C, you go to the doctor, whatever, they measure your blood, they say, hey, depends on which system you're in, but you're above 5.7 A1C or 6.1. There's different, depending who you're asking.
But if you're above this certain number of hemoglobins in your blood that have sugar, specifically glucose, attached to them, and you have this high A1C, hemoglobin A1C number, then we call you diabetic once you reach this number.
Something like 7, I forget. Okay, and then 5 point something, you're in the range of pre-diabetes, you know what I mean? But below that, you're doing pretty good. But the problem is, all the way up to here, the problem is developing. You see, developing, but we don't call it a problem officially by an ICD-9 code, which is insurance billing, but whatever.
You don't call it a problem until it's this number. And then once you have this number, then you have the problem. But until then, you're doing just fine. Don't change a thing.
Or maybe you should, because the problem was developing all the way up to here, and definitely in here, we even call that pre-diabetes, and then here you actually have the diabetes, and that can get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, depending how much sugar is stuck in your bloodstream. So anyways, but like I was saying, the sugar is beneficial. We do need sugar. Our brain loves sugar. All of our cells love sugar, glucose specifically. We use it to make energy, the ATP. Everybody's heard of ATP. That's the energy currency of the cells. That's how we pay for all the things that we do in the cell. Okay? And the cells are like a little city. But okay, too many tangents.
Diabetes. Now,
we have all this sugar stuck in the blood for too long of a period of time, so much so that it starts to stick, because sugar is sticky, to our hemoglobin. We can actually measure it, and then we tell you have this disease condition once you hit a certain number. Beautiful. What's the treatment? Well, diet and lifestyle changes. As a side note, just, you don't want to change your behavior because you have family history and culture, habits. I've always done it this way, and my family's always done it this way. And it's genetic, but we don't eat the same, we live the same lifestyle, but it's genetic. It might be. There is genetics. Don't get me wrong. Genetics are real, but so are cop-outs. So anyways, certain things are bad for everybody. It doesn't matter what race you are, how old you are. It's bad for people to eat, let's say, antifreeze. We can all agree on that. It tastes sweet. That's why you don't want the kids to get to it, because it tastes sweet. And you don't want the dog and the cat to get to it, because it tastes sweet, but it kills you. So anyways, I don't want to call out anybody at all, because there's some powerful people. I'm just saying, if we have too high of a concentration of the glucose in our blood for too long a period of time, we have a problem. It's called diabetes. And what it does is basically causes a system-wide inflammation. What causes fibromyalgia? I don't know. Nobody does, right? Everything's inflamed in fibromyalgia. My muscles hurt, my shoulders hurt, my back hurt. Everything hurts all the time, which sounds miserable. But, we're talking about diabetes, my bad. So anyway, all the sugar in the body causes inflammation throughout the whole body. Okay, but wait, why did I talk about fibromyalgia? Anyways, so that's an autoimmune condition. It's completely different. That's not what we're talking about, right? Okay, so anyways, what's the solution? Well, there's different, I won't even call their names, but there's different, let's call them medicinas, pharmacopoeias, that can counteract the condition that we're in. So if you had this chemical equation, I don't know if everybody took chemistry, but you remember math, and you had the equal sign, and one side had to be the same as the other side, even if they look different, you have to equal them, right? Well, in chemistry, it's real similar. So you have an equal sign in the middle, and you have to balance the two sides of the equation, right? So if you do something to one side of the equation after it's been balanced, then there's a counteracting response on the other side of the equation to balance the two sides. And that's why we have the equation, because they're equal. So whatever you do to one side affects the other side. Anyways, too much sugar over a long period of time, where sugar, this glucose molecule, which has a very specific shape, it actually looks like a diamond. It's kind of cool. Oops, that's on the screen. A diamond, right? And that's a carbon. I forget how it's said, but OH and blah, blah, blah. It's a little diamond crystal. It even looks like a crystal when it's stuck to a fructose, which is also its own shape, a 5-membered ring. And then you have a 6-membered and a 5-membered together, and that's a disaccharide, that's sugar, that's the white crystal. But it gets broken down starting in your mouth. Even when you start thinking about the sugar, your mouth kind of waters a little bit. When you think about whatever your favorite sweet treat is, you start salivating, right? Because the human body makes amylase, which is a starch or a carbohydrate or a sugar dissolving enzyme. And an enzyme is like Pac-Man. He has a certain shaped mouth, and it fits a certain shape molecule, and it does a certain thing to that thing. It can do it really quick, and it doesn't get used up in the process, which is why it's a catalyst. Catalysts are cool. Catalyst grill. Right? Those are the ones that take care of everything. So we want to take care of them and not waste those, the enzymes, and our ability to make those enzymes, which is the pancreas, right? The pancreas does more than make insulin. And I'm sure everybody that's heard about diabetes heard of the word insulin. Insulin is a hormone, if you didn't know. How do you make a hormone? Does she take credit card? Anyways, so all that aside, all this imbalance of the chemical equations involving glucose creates a whole cascade of problems. Let alone, that's when glucose is being used the way it's supposed to be in the chemical reactions that we want it to be used in our body. In the case of hemoglobin A1C, that's a problem. You got hemoglobins with sugar stuck all over them. They don't work the same when they got like barnacles hanging off them, right? Especially when you think about the fact that the red blood cell has to squeeze through one single red blood cell at a time through the capillary, which is such a tiny blood vessel that I believe it's smaller than the width of a hair. I'm hoping this infrared light is going to make my bald spot grow back. Anyways. Okay, so it's thinner than a human hair, and it's one red blood cell at a time. That's why red blood cells, erythrocytes, don't have a nucleus, so that they can be distensed and fit through this tiny little tube. But if they've got all these hemoglobin inside the red blood cell, because the hemoglobin is much smaller than the red blood cell, has a bunch of hemoglobins inside of it, right? Which are porphyrin molecule rings. It was 4-membered ring with an iron in the middle, and that's how we bind oxygen and carry it around our body. The problem with carbon dioxide is it binds even stronger to that iron than the oxygen does. So don't turn the car on in the garage without the door open. I had a friend that did that in high school, and it was really sad. So anyways, that's really sad. Little eucalyptus oil, come back to life real quick. This one goes out to Ryan. And Ryan's family. Anyways, so diabetes is a problem for a lot of people because all those little crystals stuck onto the hemoglobins are sharp as well as sticky, and they start tearing shit up. Oh, sorry, cuss. But when things start getting teared up by these little crystals hanging off the hemoglobin inside the red blood cells aren't so healthy. They start lysing. You have all kinds of problems, bilirubin in the urine, thing, whatever. But that's just hemoglobin A1C. Screw that. What about all the sugar floating through the blood? This is causing inflammation of the blood vessel walls, the capillaries, these tiny little capillaries. Because glucose is much, much smaller than a red blood cell. Remember I said one at a time through the capillary, if you didn't know that already. The glucose is a very, very tiny molecule compared to a cell. A cell is made of, I don't know how many molecules, like trillions? I don't know, billions of molecules make a cell, right? Red blood cell. Like, what the hell is that? I got a lizard in my fan. Poor little guy. That's happened a few times. They like to jump into the fan. I guess they can't see the blade moving. That was a big one too. All right, sorry, bud. Anyways, if he was big enough, he'd eat me, so I don't feel too bad. That's horrible. Anyways, so this problem with system-wide inflammation causes a lot of other problems, but the solution to the diabetes is the different medicines, and there's a lot of examples of that. And then there's technology to keep track of your blood sugar, even at all times. They have little Dexcoms and things like that. Anyways, but that's because we're trying to take care of the problem. Now, so what do? We give something called insulin. That's not debatable. Okay, so insulin is the hormone that our pancreas makes. Okay. And insulin does a few things, but in this context, it brings sugar into the cell so that they can use it to make the ATP in the mitochondria. And if you don't have the insulin, the sugar can't get in the cell, okay? So now, I'm not exactly sure where the breakdown was because I got corrected by a doctor a few months ago on my theory for several years, actually. So I'm not saying I'm right about everything. I continually learn more. But let's say this. Grease is a very viscous material compared to water, just relatively. So if you drip grease or oil down a slanted surface in water, just pure H2O, distilled, nothing in it, down a slanted surface, same material, which one's going to hit the bottom of the slanted surface first, the oil or the water? Oil or the water? The water, because the water is less viscous. It has a lot of surface tension, but surface tension is related to viscosity, so the oil has an even higher surface tension. Like if you jumped into a pool full of water versus a pool full of oil, belly flop's gonna hurt. I don't know if it hurt worse because that instantaneous is like concrete either way. But let's just say after you hit the concrete, you're gonna sink a little bit slower in the oil than you're gonna sink in the water because the oil molecules hold to each other more tightly than the water molecules, as far as I understand. It's more viscous. That being said, if you eat a lot of oil, which is liquid fat, because fat is solid oil and oil is liquid fat, if we eat that in the diet, which we need, I'm not saying not to eat fat. Of course we need fat. We use fat for all kinds of things in our body. I'm not saying don't eat fat. What I am saying is too much is too much. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Oxygen, fat, water, glucose, insulin, Because here's the problem with giving people insulin. Once their body has become resistant to insulin, which is what diabetes type 2 kind of really is in a lot of ways. It's not only that, it's a whole syndrome. I don't know if you can actually call it a syndrome, but it kind of is. Giving people insulin is the way it's dealt with. And what has happened is, because the sugar's so high in the bloodstream on a regular basis with people who have diabetes or who are developing diabetes, which I'm just going to define as too much sugar in the blood for too long a period of time. Okay? So if people have that condition, because I'm not a medical doctor and I don't have medical advice or anything like that, please consult your physician before making any decisions about your own health and personal well-being. This is not medical advice. This is for entertainment purposes only, and I'm a comedian. So, because there's so much sugar in the blood, the pancreas can sense how much sugar's in the blood. I don't know exactly how. There's some sort of mechanism, and it makes more insulin to compensate because there's more sugar in the blood than is healthy. Let's just say that. Healthy. Because I don't know what the cure is. But let's just say more than healthy amounts of sugar. Okay, so let's just say too much sugar. Okay, so we have too much sugar, more than our body can process quickly enough to not cause problems. Let's just say that's what we'll define as too much. So I don't know how much is too much, but let's just call it too much so we can all agree and move forward. Okay, so too much sugar causes inflammation throughout all the blood vessels of the body. Did you know there's so many blood vessels in the body that besides your connective tissue, there's no more than 2 cell widths between a capillary and another capillary, which is 1 red blood cell at a time because they're so tiny. That's how many blood vessels we have. And if you go to the Body Life exhibit where they put the epoxy in those people that donated their bodies to science, you can see that there's so many blood vessels in a human body or a horse or the different animals they do, and they inject the epoxy in there. Like the coroner does the embalming fluid, but in this case it's epoxy, so it lasts forever, and they melt everything else off with acid, so now you can see just the cardiovascular system. And it's so extensive and intricate with the little tiny capillaries that it looks like a human still. It looks like a horse, basically, without skin or muscle or anything else, obviously. But it has the same general shape, very well defined, because there's so many blood vessels in our bodies, anything that's alive. Multicellular. Anyways. So if you got inflammation in all those, actually, I've heard, and I don't know if this is true because I haven't measured it myself, so we have to take somebody's word for it at some point, right? But I want to reference all my sources because we're living in Gen Z, although it's fading out to Gen Alpha, so we'll see what they say. But we got to reference everything we say, right? So I don't need references. I'm just rapping and telling jokes, basically. But what I heard is that if you take the average human cardiovascular system of all the branching arteries, veins, arterioles, venules, capillaries, and you put it all together and you measure, and you instead of a branching network, 2 vines branching, divine, 2 is die and vine. Anyways, it looks like a divine of trees or roots and nervous system and cardiovascular, all looks the same. Branching, lightning. Anyways, God has a certain signature on everything. It's divine. Anyways, so that divine structure is completely inflamed. That's going through everything in the body. Less so in the connective tissue. That's why it takes longer to heal. Anyways, what? Well, and the cerebrospinal fluid is a filtrate from the blood. So the brain and the spinal cord have their own special bath that they're taking, just floating in there. Blah, blah, blah. So you want to take care of that too. So you don't want that fluid to be dirty. And if the blood's dirty, that fluid's maybe going to be dirty. I don't know. Is that an assumption? Probably. But anyways, heavy metals and things like that can get into the body through various means. And then those heavy metals are toxic. And the reason they're toxic is because they hurt the body. They're not healthy for the body, and they hurt the body, they kill the body, they steal life, and they destroy the structure of the architecture of the flesh, which is the temple of the Holy Spirit, the name of my channel. Because we are carbon-based life forms, and carbon has 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons. That's 666. That's the mark of the beast. The flesh is carbon-based, which is the flesh of the beast, but also the temple of the Holy Spirit. So do we get caught up with fleshly carnal desire and lost in things that kill, steal, and destroy our health? Because alcohol is poison. There's no benefit to drinking alcohol. Sorry. Oop. Caffeine, debatable. I hear both, so I still drink caffeine. I gotta work on that one. Anyways, meat, I don't know. Dead animals, I don't know. But right now we're talking about diabetes. Let's talk about simple physics. If you got oil flowing through a tube and you got water flowing through the tube, which one needs more pressure to push it through? The oil, because it's thicker, it's more viscous. So if you got all this grease in the body, in the blood vessels from the food we're eating, like let's just say fried chicken, delicious, love it, can't stop eating it, need to stop. Loaded with trans fats, we'll talk about that in a second. But that loaded blood vessel with all that grease is harder to push through, so the heart has to push harder, which is raising the blood pressure. And then you put salt, so now you retain water, so you have too much water in the blood vessel, because water's a good thing, but too much water is also a bad thing. Too much of anything is a bad thing. So salt makes you have too much water in your blood vessels, and then you're also raises your blood pressure, because now you have this higher volume inside of a system that is distensible. The blood vessels can extend and distend both ways. Distend, extend, whatever. So they can capacitate a larger volume and a smaller volume depending on what's in our bloodstream. So when you die, you don't die right away, because your body's going to constrict all the blood vessels and try and save your vital organs, and everything's going to go to your brain and your heart and your lungs, and then you're probably going to pass out, so you don't burn any extra energy, blah, blah, blah. Too much. Okay. CPR. Learn it. And just let me say the trans fats before I forget. So the thing is, there's a chirality to every molecule, like it's on one side of the other side. No, that's not true. Some are chiral, which means they're mirrors of each other. I forget. Semantics. Anyways, but the structure of the molecule is a certain way until you add too much heat. Too much heat changes the structure because it accelerates the vibrations between the different atoms so that they start vibrating faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, and then they're more liable to break that said electronic bond, which is the electron clouds interacting with each other. The nuclei never touch anything. It's always electric. And when that happens, the molecule structures change, and Pac-Man's mouth doesn't fit the molecule anymore. It's a weird shape now, so it can't fit the molecule anymore. So what happens? The immune system tags it and says, this is a foreign invader. Foreign invader, immune system, whoop, whoop. So now all the macrophages and neutrophils, I don't know exactly all the different ones that attack this specific foreign invader, but things start to glom on, and the immune system starts to attack this food that we were eating that was altered by the heat, which is what the raw food is saying, not to cook your food, because it changed the chemical structure. The enzymes can't recognize the chemical structure anymore, and the immune system flags it. Now you have system-wide inflammation. Anything, or at least your intestinal system, is very inflamed. Irritable bowel syndrome. Keep that too long, you got Crohn's, and then keep that too long, you got colon cancer, and then keep that too long, we're going to cut a piece of your colon out and take it out and then sew it back together, and you got a colostomy bag in the meantime, burp it in the bag, and the fart comes out. It's disgusting. Anyways, no judgment. We do what we got to do to survive. What I'm trying to say is an ounce of prevention is truly worth more than a pound of cure. Because if you never had the problem to begin with, you don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to get rid of it. Anyways, some of these problems are real bad. You don't want these. Diabetes is one of those, in my opinion. Some people might want diabetes and think it's worth it. The benefit of eating too much sugar, and I'm going to claim too much grease, and developing diabetes is a personal choice. If you're aware of the choice. If you don't have any idea because your family taught you how to eat, and all the commercials on TV and all the billboards on the highway also told you how to eat, and all the certain types of restaurants that are all along every major highway in the country, everywhere, branching everywhere, tempting you with those special colors. You got orange, what is it, red, yellow. Those ones make you hungry. Anyways, red and blue make you excited, because that's the two sides of the visual spectrum. I love this color light therapy, because red is the basis layer that we can, layer, that's a good one, frequency that our eyes can perceive. The red, there's infrared that we can't see, but rattlesnakes can. And then there's violet, which is the highest, yeah, pretty much. And then above that's the ultraviolet, which we can't see, but bees can see. So it's real, and we can measure it. Anyways, if you're not aware, you're not aware. If you don't know, you don't know. But what I'm trying to do is say, hey, did you know? So it's the dawning of the age of Aquarius. I've heard different numbers when it actually started, depending on which calendar you go by, Gregorian, Mayan, whatever, Chinese. But I think it's all agreed upon by people that believe in that it is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. So I am an Aquarius. And Aquarius is all about the future, electricity, the color purple. Love me some Prince. But humanity, humanitarianism. I watched my grandpa die when I was 4, right in front of my eyes. He said, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And then he died. And the paramedics came in, tried to bring him back to life with CPR. I don't know exactly the course, but he died. I watched him die. And it was intense. So he was only 54 and I was 4. It made an impression on me, so I feel compassion for random strangers. Sue me. Actually, don't. Please don't. Anyways. Just trying to help. If you have too much sugar in your blood for too long, you have a high hemoglobin A1C, the doctor can check it for you and tell you where you are. Just because you're below the lowest number doesn't mean you don't have a problem, because it's developing up to the ICD-9 code. I mean, the number for A1C, where you're defined as having diabetes or pre-diabetes and then diabetes. Sorry, remember our pie chart. But that doesn't mean you don't have a problem here. So let's nip it in the bud before it's a problem, a real big problem. Because it's already a problem. Let's not let it get worse. Because it's getting worse.
Statistically. Okay. So insulin is given. The problem with the insulin, sorry I keep beating around the bush, is that the pancreas keeps sensing this high level of sugar, specifically glucose, in the blood, so it starts making more and more insulin. Now more and more insulin's floating around your bloodstream. I don't know if it goes in the lymph, but probably. Anyways.
And then we have all this insulin floating around the body. And it's actually extra insulin because we ate extra sugar, right? So
extra sugar, or at least I'm going to argue in just a second that the grease is keeping the sugar trapped inside the bloodstream, even though I had an argument with the doctor who said it wasn't true. I think it is. Anyways, if we have that, and now all of our cells in our entire body are being subjected to higher than normal, higher than healthy, higher than average, well, I shouldn't say average, more and more people get diabetes. Then I'm going to open the door, I need some oxygen. Whoo, baby, it's getting warm in here. What happens is all those cells get desensitized to the insulin. That's the problem. Now they're desensitized to the insulin, so you go to certain people that are trying to help you and they give you insulin. Now you get more insulin on top of extra insulin that your pancreas has been making probably for years, trying to compensate for the high levels of blood sugar. It's called too much, glycosugar, emia means blood, too much sugar in the blood, hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia makes you feel tachycardic, kind of dizzy, anxious, and you have too much sugar in your blood. It's like a kid, and they run around in circles because they're trying to burn the sugar off. Just like a coyote, when they take poison, they run as fast as they can to try and burn off the poison before it kills them, because their metabolism revs up when they're running. Coyotes survive a lot of things, and they've infiltrated everywhere humans have, more than we know. They're ninjas. Anyways. I'm talking about the animal. So anyways, now, the solution supposedly is allopathic medicine, which is to use the opposite of what you have going on. So too much sugar in the blood, we're going to give you more insulin because insulin takes sugar out of the blood and puts it in the cells. The problem is your body was already making a bunch of extra insulin, and probably by the time you get to the doctor and they say you have A1C of diabetes or pre-diabetes, your pancreas is getting tired. Pancreas is getting tired because it's been making a lot of extra insulin for probably years. So it's tired, it can do it, but it starts to get tired and worn out. Just like any machine, if you don't give it a renewal period, turn the computer off every few days so it can reboot and defrag, even though Macs don't need to defrag anymore, they still do work better if you turn them off every once in a while. Meditation's great because you stop thinking, right? Throwing a lot of thoughts at you guys. Try and keep your mind open if you never thought about things in this way, because this is important. If you don't have it, probably somebody does that you care about and you'd like to help them. So anyways, the problem is you give them more insulin. They're already desensitized to insulin. Now they get even more desensitized to insulin. So now the problem is worse. Maybe in the immediate, and that's why probably in emergent situations, there's nothing wrong with helping somebody out and giving them some extra insulin if their sugar's in the, say, 400, 600, 700s, because that happens. It's supposed to be between 70 and 100, depending on who you ask. That's a lot of sugar in your blood. So yeah, in that case, I have no problem with helping somebody out emergently, giving them some insulin, going through some diabetic ketoacidosis protocols, and bring them back to life, okay? Nothing wrong with that. The problem is we could have stopped it way before it was such a big problem. And that's what I'm advocating in this video. So far, I've only talked about the problem. I haven't really talked about the solution. So let's cut to the interlude. Not the interlude, what's in the middle. This will be the crescendo, and then we'll do now. So anyways, the solution, in my opinion, and this is not a medical opinion, I'm not a medical doctor, this is not medical advice, please consult your physician before you make any decision about your own personal health and well-being. My opinion is, if we didn't have so much sugar floating through our blood, and I still haven't argued for the too much grease floating through our blood, we wouldn't have such a problem with diabetes, because our body would be able to put all that sugar and all that fat that we're eating into the cells at a rate that's adequate to keep it from building up on the walls of our blood vessels, which is atherosclerosis. This is the number one killer. If you can separate these things from each other, because it's grease on the walls of the blood vessels. Grease is liquid fat, and fat is solid grease. It goes on liquid, but it turns solid as it stays there longer because the water gets pulled out of it and calcium gets deposited into it by the body, and cholesterol gets deposited into that fat that gets thicker and thicker and thicker on the inner lumen of our blood vessels. That means that the tube used to be this big and it's getting smaller the more grease that we cake onto the walls, just like the P-trap under your sink that you have to clean out like every 10 years because you did the dishes from the food that we ate that was very greasy. We washed it down the sink, the grease built up on the P-trap, and then it stopped the flow of life. Let's just call it life because we're talking about the human body. Okay, so Satan is the opposer, the accuser, the obstruction. You know, opposer, obstruction, it's kind of similar, like a synonym. So Satan is the opposition of life, the thing that is opposite to life, because evil is live spelled backwards, L-I-V-E-E-V-I-L. So evil is all the things that take away life, okay? So, you know, Christians don't want to say, they want to say yoga is evil, and maybe it is, I don't know. But they had a lot of wisdom. The best way to tell a lie, though, is mostly truth with a little bit of sprinkled lie in there to really dupe people with manipulation. So that's, I'm not saying I haven't been duped, okay? But check this out. So yoga is actually 8 limbs. It's not just stretching. Stretching is asana. That's number 3. 3? 3, yes. Number 3 of the 8. Okay, so 1, 2 come before 3, and 1 is the yama and the niyama. I always forget exactly which is which, but the yama is basically you stop doing the things that are bad for you, all the vices like drinking alcohol, which is poison, eating too much starch and sugar and fat and too much salt and all these things that taste so good, you know. We stop doing those things. That's the yamas. The things that we know are bad for us, okay? Ignorance isn't bliss. Ignorance is anxiety and depression. And that's why people are on... Okay? Oops. I said a demon name. I mean, never mind. I'm gonna have to bleep that out. Anyways. The system-wide inflammation and then giving insulin on top of it to make the cells even more desensitized to insulin perpetuates the problem, actually makes it worse if you think about it logically. I'm not a doctor, but, right? If the problem was desensitization to insulin, adding more insulin would cause more desensitization, right? Thank you. Anyways, so I would advocate for decreasing the amount of sugar and fat floating through our bloodstream, which would be the diet that we're eating. But my genetics and my family and my culture, and this is how we've always done it, and bandwagon fallacy. Appeal to tradition. These are logical fallacies. They're not logical. We all do it because it's a justification for bad decisions. Especially if you have friends that are doing the same thing. Now you have support to do the wrong thing. So anyways, what I'm advocating for is the right thing as best we can. I'm not saying I have the ultimate answer on this, but decreasing the amount of sugar, fat, and salt that we're intaking in our diet has nothing to do with genetics or culture or history or habits. I mean, it does have to do with habits. Exactly. So that would just be a habit, and a habit is just an action that we do repetitively. So the step to creating a new habit would be to do a new action. So once you do a new action, that's once, you know, but if you do it twice, you're starting to make progress. 3 times would be better. And then if you kept doing the good habit, or good action, it would become what's called a habit, because now you do it consistently, which is discipline. Discipline is the only way to self-respect. I don't care what anybody says. If you don't have discipline, you don't respect yourself, and otherwise you're just pretending. And a lot of people do fake it till you make it, right? I hope that's dead. I hate that phrase. Fake it till you make it. Why not be real? Okay, so anyways, I'm trying to be as real as I can. I know I'm a character. Just telling jokes, talking story. Lower the fat intake, lower the sugar intake, lower the salt intake, which is your personal decision to be disciplined or not. Has nothing to do with weather, circumstances. Really anything that happens to us, our only choice is how we respond. So if you respond with a lack of discipline, then that's your choice, and I'll make mine, you know? So I mess up all the time. So I'm not trying to say I'm Mr. Perfect over here. I'm tired of always being Mr. Perfect, like Dwight said on The Office. But just because I make a bad decision doesn't mean the truth isn't true. Don't kill the messenger. Kill the bad habit. Peace, love, joy, blessings. Take deep breaths. I haven't even breathe this whole time. Okay, let's do a few deep breaths and close this video out. You ready? Okay, so exhale all your air. Really push it out your abs. Like push out all the air. Okay, inhale. All right, hold it in if you don't have hypertension, and then exhale. We'll do a better video on how to do the breathing exercises, but it's always good to do a couple. Let's do one more. 4, 7, 8. Okay, inhale for 4. Exhale for 8. Peace.